Hi CMG270. This is our video essay. It was a bumpy ride, but boy, it sure was fun, so you better buckle up and get ready for a grand old time. This is gonna be fun! The way we decided to organize our video essay was by breaking the whole process down into 7 steps. These steps include imposition, printing, folding, collating, cutting, binding, and then finalizing. Hannah is going to kick things off for us.
For the imposition of our 2 books, we used our knowledge of Prep 7 and Printergy Evo. We had to take into consideration the page sizes to determine which size paper to use and how the projects would be imposed. A challenge we faced with the cookbook was that the designers had added an extra ½ inch to the original design dimensions, which meant we had to switch to a 4-page signature rather than 8. Printing turned out to be quite the process. For both books, the first step was to print out a few copies and check and fix the registration. Once we got that as close as we could, we went on to print the signatures. For the cookbook, we printed signature by signature so that we could fold and hand collate later. That took a long time because we had to individually send 30 signatures through to print. For the nonfiction trauma, we printed book by book rather than signature by signature, which proved to be quite a bit quicker. A challenge with this was some yellow streaking on the pages, especially on the copies printed towards the end. Luckily, it was mostly just on our extra copies, but it was still frustrating.
Folding was an adventure. We only needed 1 fold on our cookbook, and thus we decided to employ the tabletop folder. This was a good idea until we realized that it was, for whatever reason, not making a perfect fold for every sheet that ran through it. We probably weren't managing our variables correctly, and this was scary, because at the time, the Conic was having an emotional breakdown, and we couldn't seem to get his cousin down the road to change paper sizes.
Let me smash. Please.
So at that moment, what we had was what we had, and we couldn't waste any of it. To combat this folding inconsistency, we decided to feed the sigs through 1 by 1 in the exact same fashion every single time. Efficient? No. Fun? No. Finished. We also learned the value of a perforation in your signature during this experience, particularly during the folding of our second book, which we did 2 folds on the tabletop due to lack of time. With no perforation, the book blocks were unwieldy and hard to measure correctly. The second book, since we printed them not by signature but by full block, were folded in stacks, and these inconsistencies continued to be a problem.
Oh, come on!
But the job got done. Collation was fun and easy, which was a much-needed breath of fresh air. We had 30 signatures in total, which allowed me to get this fun little shot right here, and it was super satisfying to see them all stacked up at the end. That's really about it.
So when we were cutting our books, our first one, the chef's book, was a bit tricky. So before we had to send it to the binder, we had to cut off a little bit of the excess trim so it could get to fit the initial cover design with the margins and everything. On the reverse side of that, we had to deal with our nonfiction trauma book, which actually was the opposite. We had to cut the cover first to match the stock and then trim it down once again once we finished the bind on it.
Okay, so our experience with the Perfect Binder, Hannah and I apparently didn't set the correct spine width right away, so that messed everything up, and Keith had to come and correct that, and once we had our correct spine width set, it was smoother sailing. Our book blocks ended up being bigger than our covers, so we had to cut those down to work with our covers, and then once we had our book blocks cut down, everything set for our covers, we were able to dish out our books, no problem.